Okay, so for my latest video blog, I'm going to be talking about the new film from new film from Christopher Nolan, featuring Christian Bale amongst many others, The Dark Knight Rises, the third in the Dark Knight trilogy. And for anyone who reads or listens to this blog, or any of the stuff I do, you've probably got the impression by now that I'm quite a comic book fan, and particularly a fan of comic book movies, and even ones like Captain America, the 1990 version, not the more recent version. I have something of a soft spot for. I'll put the link back to my review of Captain America on the bottom of this somewhere as well. So it was definitely with a sense of excitement and anticipation that I headed into the cinema to watch The Dark Knight Rises, the third in what's become known as Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. And from the start, it was pretty clear that this was going to be, as expected really, the exact opposite of Marvel's big summer blockbuster this year, The Avengers. But while it was complete opposite, it did at the same time sort of manage to be equally as engaging as that film and as enjoyable, but obviously in a very, very different way. And the thing that strikes me most about The Dark Knight Rises, that doesn't involve massive spoilers, because I'm going to try not to put spoilers into this, is that it manages to at once be one of the most comic book-like movies I've seen in quite a long time in terms of its plot and its structure and its style, while also delivering that sort of something different that has become the mark of Nolan's Bat movies, with the genuine sort of sense of real-worldness in a lot of ways, I guess, as much as Batman and superhero things can be real-world. And while the first in the Dark Knight trilogy is the origin story, explains how Bruce Wayne became Batman, or how Batman kind of came to be, and the second goes off the rails in a lot of ways, but I don't mean that as a criticism. It's meant to go off the rails because the Joker and the Two-Face are all about mayhem. This third, seems to be something of an exploration of the concepts of sort of post 9/11 terrorism and things like that, as well as just being a great story about the Batman as well. The notion of exploring terrorism is an interesting one, because it's, well, for one, it's something that's sort of been there from the beginning. There was something in the Ra's al Ghul character in the first one which had a bit of that to it, but here in Dark Knight Rises, throughout the movie, I'm sort of getting the sense from it that it was a bit of a comment on the idea of religious fundamentalist terrorism, with Bane inspiring these sort of people to follow him to the death, literally. And I know that's set up in the first scene of the film, really, that this is people who will go to their death for this guy. And, you know, never quite sure why, to be honest, but I'd never be quite sure why in any sense, so I guess it's doing the right thing. There does seem to be a sort of view that the whole storyline with Bane is a look and a criticism of the ideals and ideas behind the Occupy and 99% movements, and I guess I can see how people could come to that conclusion if, I don't know, if they were particularly anti it in the first place, or if they were looking to make this out as an anti-that movement piece. But I personally didn't really see that in Bane's actions, and if anything, it would be a criticism of anyone who might abuse the ideas and the ethics, the ethos of the Occupy and 99% movements for their own gain, with twisting the original ideals of it in much the same way back again that arguably religious fundamentalist terrorists twist the ideals of their religions, of the religions they supposedly subscribe to. Anyway, away from the issues, which also contain the standard Batman thread of dealing with loss and grief and all of that, my only thought on the story, not taking us into spoiler territory hopefully, is that for the less involved comic book fans, people who've not read so much of the books or sort of been so into the films as I have, I'm not sure how much sense some of the film would end up making. And it's hard to speak from being such a fan that the whole thing made sense to me, but does it to everyone? I don't know. I mean, while I was able to revel in the references and pick up on the details relating to characters' backstories and various bits of the comics, I wasn't entirely sure how clear that would have been to people who weren't deeply, or as deeply embedded in the DC universe as I might be. And I mean, the film references probably 3 of my favourite arcs and storylines within Batman. I'm not sure if I should say what those are here because it might sort of spoil it for people, but there are 3 major storylines within the comics which are sort of thrown into the mix to make The Dark Knight Rises. And yeah, that's the thing. I wonder if to the less initiated, some of the exposition might have been confusing and a bit over the top, with too many characters being introduced to keep the whole thing going. In terms of the new characters, though, when it comes to the main ones, I found Nolan once again sort of got some excellent interpretations of some of the comic book characters that I'm not sure, but they might actually outdo the likes of the Joker and Two-Face from The Dark Knight, and almost certainly outdo Ra's al Ghul from the first one, much as I like Liam Neeson's take on Ra's al Ghul. He's not a character that resonates with me in the same way that Joker and Two-Face did, and that the characters in this seem to do as well. And I guess most obviously of the new characters is Tom Hardy's Bane. And while in the comics he's a mercenary who is hyper-intelligent and both a physical and mental match for the Batman, he also, somewhat bizarrely, seems to wear a pro wrestling outfit and something akin to a luchador mask for much of the time on screen, although the mask has the venom pipes and whatnot going into it, similar to as it does here, although it's not venom in this film. Here, though, in The Dark Knight Rises, he's transformed into a mercenary come terrorist who's on a par with Batman in much the same way, but thankfully has replaced the spandex with body armour, combat trousers, and a frankly fantastic fur-lined coat, along with the face mask, which makes him look like some kind of actual monster. I mean, if you've seen the trailers and things to it, you'll have seen the mask. It comes across looking like teeth. It's not teeth, obviously, but it's what it looks like, which is really impressive looking and actually genuinely quite unnerving at times. And this sort of whole thing comes together to make him almost an exact opposite in terms of both sort of mentally and physically in many ways to the Batman. And while in The Dark Knight, the previous one, the Joker was presented as an opposite of the Bat, that was in terms of a sort of control and chaos. Batman was in control of what he was doing to an extent, while the Joker was this agent of absolute chaos and mayhem. Here, it's the terms of how someone with the same powers, as much as Batman has superpowers, which is the sort of the money, the technology, the drive to do what he does, how someone with these powers would come out if their moral compass was flipped the other way around. So rather than using them to spread, well, good is probably not the word, but to try and clean up the city, here Bane is, well, trying to destroy everything pretty much. And it's an interesting antagonist, which does follow on neatly from the way Ra's al Ghul and the aforementioned Clown Prince of Crime both did the same kind of job. The other new character we meet is Selina Kyle, known, of course, more commonly as Catwoman, here played by Anne Hathaway, who creates a version of Kyle, clearly referencing elements from Frank Miller's Batman Year One, which is referenced a lot throughout the whole trilogy, really. I mean, it's clearly where the starting point of this version of Batman came from, and keeps alive the idea here that Kyle is not a straight-out villain. I mean, in the 60s Batman TV show, if there's even a way of comparing these two things, Selina Kyle, the Catwoman, was a villain, straight out. She was a robber, that was that. Here, though, there's something a little bit different there, and she almost has what I can only describe, and again, hopefully not giving you any spoilers, as something of a Han Solo kind of an arc within this film, which is sort of a refreshing way of doing it. And much like Bane and the Joker and Two-Face and Ra's al Ghul have done in the past in this series, they all serve to highlight elements of the Batman Bruce Wayne character, which is something that really sets this series of films apart compared to some of the previous ones, is that Bruce Batman is the centre of it, whereas in the Tim Burton ones and then the Batman Forever and Batman and Robin that follow, it was quite often the villains who were the centre of the thing and Batman was there with them. Here, Batman is the thing being referenced and the central point that all of these characters sort of serve to reflect. And speaking of the Batman and some of the other returning characters, once again, the performances and the way they're portrayed is brilliant. Christian Bale, obviously, as Bruce Wayne and Batman, Michael Caine as Alfred, and Gary Oldman as Commissioner here, Gordon. Yes, so it's not much of a spoiler, it happens in the first scene, really. You find out that he is now Commissioner Gordon as opposed to Lieutenant or Captain. And they are sort of the foundations that the rest of the film is laid on, because they're set up so clearly in the previous two films. And there's not really much more that can be said about the developments of the characters of any of them, which don't go into major spoiler territory, so I'll leave that out and let you go and see the film for that. But in the end, for me, Dark Knight Rises is an absolutely brilliant piece of cinema. It sort of left me shell-shocked in the end in a certain way. I was just like, they actually did all of that. I kind of hoped they would, but they actually did it. It sort of combines the comic book conventions with the big blockbuster conventions with what Christopher Nolan has become known for bringing to big blockbusters with these Dark Knight films and others as well. And it just winds up this trilogy, which hopefully this is now the complete product. They have said it is, but I always worry that they're going to do a George Lucas. But hopefully this is, you know, a complete product, 3 films, the Dark Knight trilogy, and it rounds it all off excellently. And to be honest, this may well have overtaken Star Wars as my favourite movie trilogy. The original Star Wars trilogy, that is, not the 3 new ones. So yeah, just maybe. Remains to be seen, I think, but it might have done that.